It's now my privilege to introduce our second two panelists who will continue the great conversation we've just had with the Prime Minister and Secretary Paulson. I'll call to the stage Peter Agnefjäll, President and CEO of IKEA, and Agnes, Kalibata, the former Minister of Agriculture and Animal Resources of Rwanda, who is now the interim president of the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa. So thank you. I have to say, Peter, that I think IKEA is amazing. And so it's going to be great for the audience to hear from you the various investments that you've made and the way you're thinking about this. You have an initiative called People and Planet Positive. And so your aim, as I understand it, is to limit how IKEA contributes to the negative footprint, but also to make a hugely positive impact. And I know many things you've done. You've installed nearly 650,000 solar panels, invested in over 200 wind turbines, implemented warehouse energy efficiency programs. I could go on and on. Why are these actions so important to IKEA? And how does this influence, if at all, the other actors in your supply chain? Because obviously you're sourcing as well. So tell us what actions they're taking and whether you directly try to influence that.
Well, first of all, maybe to put it into perspective, IKEA was founded some 70 years ago, and our vision is very much about creating a better everyday life for the many people. And with a vision like that, it's obviously that we're just at the beginning. Today, we are a 30 billion euro company. We have about 700 million visitors in our stores, 1.5 billion on the web. But, you know, there are more than 7 billion on this planet. So I think it's very clear to us that we're just at the beginning. And we've set out an ambitious growth agenda on how we would like to continue to grow and develop our business. And obviously, we would like to grow and develop the business within the limits of the planet. And therefore, we have set up the sustainability agenda that you just mentioned, that we would like to become people and planet positive. Meaning, we just don't want our business to be less bad. At the end of the day, we would like to have a positive impact on people and the planets. And that's what we're working with very much. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this as we speak. I think the other reason became very clear to me yesterday. We have a lot of consumer data and marketing fact sheets and so forth, and they very clearly say to us that customers care about sustainability. They would like to live a more sustainable life at home. But marketing fact sheets is one thing. But when you saw hundreds of thousands of people across the world, and more than 300,000 people walking here in New York, myself included, you know, then you realize that this is actually in the interest of the many people. So, and then obviously, then it also makes good sense. It makes business sense. It's a driver of innovation, of new business, and of renewal. So I think that's why we have decided so clearly to engage in this question.
I want to pursue that before turning to the important question of agriculture, because there are many who say that consumers march, but they don't put their pocketbooks behind those actions, that they're still not willing to pay for or look for those kinds of sustainable products. What are you actually seeing?
Well, I think we see very much that too. Customers would like our products to be produced in a sustainable way. They would like them to support them in living a more sustainable life at home. But they're not prepared to compromise. They're not prepared to compromise in the sense that they would like the products to be a little bit funny in design, a little bit funny in colors, etc. They want sustainable products to be as attractive as any other product. and they are not prepared to compromise when it comes to affordability. If we make sustainability into a luxury thing for the affluent few, we will not move the agenda towards where we need to take it. So it's very true. I think it's very important that we don't make this into a compromise.
I think this is important action that we need to take out of here for us as consumers. We are all consumers in terms of actions that we could engage in that would really start to move the needle. Agnes, you had such an amazing impact in Rwanda as agriculture minister in terms of helping to transform the economy and lift so many smallholders out of poverty. And yet many people look at agriculture as being one of the causes of some of the terrible climate impacts that we've seen. Over half, actually, of agricultural production is smallholders. And how do we influence them, I think, is a critical question. You're in a new role as interim president of the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, which gives you a pan-African platform on which to build your knowledge and experience. But how do we reduce the tension between the carbon production in agriculture or the poor water practices that many smallholders engage in, deforestation practices and the like, and all of the opportunities that we want smallholders to have for economic growth and prosperity?
Thank you so much. It's interesting that you asked that. At the beginning of this month, we launched a book on climate-smart agriculture. Now, this book was financed, as you know, by the Rockefeller Foundation, and thank you. In this book, we clearly outlined the technologies that farmers need to be taking up to ensure that they are doing a good job in terms of resilience, in terms of adoption. We are demonstrating that so much has been done in terms of developing locally adopted varieties on the African continent that farmers would take up to be able to deal with climate change. We have invested as AGRA over $180 million in developing soil-integrated technologies that would prevent or help farmers to adopt to what is happening in the environment in terms of increasing yields. So there's so much that has been done already. AGRA itself has generated over 400 varieties of locally adopted varieties that would never have been researched on by private companies because they are staple crops. These varieties are adaptable to drought, to diseases, and are available for farmers to use. So everything is already happening. The question for me would be, today we are not seeing as much happening in terms of adopting these technologies. We are not seeing as much. We know that the correlation is there in terms of profitability and resilience and adoption, but it's not happening fast enough. So one of the things that we'll be looking at going forward is, what do we need to target better? What do we need to be doing differently to ensure that farmers are taking up these technologies and reducing their footprint? Do we need to target youth better? Do we need to target mobile technologies better, smartphones, so that we communicate better? Do we need to target women better? How do we harness the technologies that we have developed as AGRA and other institutions? So these are some of the things that we need to look at. But the technologies are there.
Let me turn to another industry that is often considered problematic in the climate change domain, the textile and fiber industry. It's one of the largest carbon emitters in the world, responsible in a continuing assessment for 20% of the world's carbon footprint and up to 20% of industrial water pollution. IKEA recently established the Launch Nordic Innovation Challenge, a challenge in collaboration with USAID, NASA, and Nike. Can you tell us about it? And after you tell us about that challenge, tell us more broadly how you focus on promoting innovation in this space.
Well, if I would start, I would start in the other end, though. Supply chain can, of course, be very complicated. At IKEA, we have more than 1,000 suppliers in more than 50 countries. And what we have done and what we have realized is if we just put clear targets out there, what is it that we would like to achieve, then we can actually move the industry as a whole. For instance, if you talk about cotton, IKEA was one of the founding members of the Better Cotton Initiative, and we set up the target that we would like all of our textiles to become from more sustainable sources, and that is, for example, made according to the Better Cotton Initiative. And that's what we drive first and foremost, to secure that the raw materials, the main raw materials that we have in our products, becomes more sustainable. That goes for wood, where we would like 100% of our wood to be from more preferred sources, FSC certified or recycled. And this week we have announced that we are going 100% for recycled or renewable plastic. So I think it's very important to really to set these a little bit bold and challenging targets, and really to go for the 100% targets, because that's when you make clear to your organizations and to your supply chain that you are serious about the business. Then, of course, besides that, the core of the business, you also need to work with more disruptive innovation, if you say like that. And for instance, what we have done is that we have invested together with Nike in a company called Daiku, that enables to dye textiles in a way that is means usage of significantly less water and less energy. So there are a number of ways to tackle the issues that you have in your supply chain, but our approach is really to go after the most significant parts and the most difficult parts from the beginning. But of course, to be innovative and to invest in other areas is very important too.
That's very exciting. Do you ever get asked by your shareholders whether this is hurting or helping the bottom line? And what's your answer?
Well, fortunately, we're a privately held company owned by a foundation, and the owner, just as ourselves, have a very long-term approach. But we see in reality that the investments that we are doing pays off. It does make very good business sense. And I think what I've been hearing here this week is that a call for policymakers to take clearer leadership and so forth. And I believe that that's very important. But I would also like to say that within the framework that still exists, it is possible to actually move quite a lot of good investments for a more sustainable society.
Great. Agnes Agra has launched a pilot program in partnership with the government of Sweden in Tanzania, investing in financial literacy and training and increasing access to financial services for thousands of smallholder farmers and also small and medium entrepreneurs and agro dealers. How do you see this kind of program influencing the economics of climate change and the economics of agriculture on the continent?
Thank you. Judith, picture this, because I've thought about this question several times. Picture this. Picture you had your salary coming twice a year, in June and in December, because that's what happens to smallholder farmers. Now, your bills are busy piling up, and you only be able to get money once. So these farmers have to make very difficult choices. They have to make choices as whether they would cut the woodlot that they have next to them, or they would sell a cow, they would sacrifice their daughter's school fees, they will make a choice between a boy and a girl being educated. This is what happens in the real world of smallholder farmers. Now, when we have financial literacy coming in, when we have financial instruments coming in, we allow farmers to have a proper cash flow that they can depend on. We allow them to have choices, to make informed decisions. We allow them to take bold steps, including taking out an insurance coverage for what will happen to them. So these farmers are already, when this happens, these farmers start making investments that are based on what they have learned, as opposed to sacrificing the little that they have saved. Now, what we are doing with this grant in Tanzania, we have actually focused on women. 60% of the recipients are women because women naturally have very little access to financing. And what we did is we went out targeting 20,000 farmers and been able to bring in money that has actually allowed us to reach 140,000 farmers. So we are using these tools. We are helping these farmers make the right choices in terms of investments, but also increase productivity that then allows them not to encroach so much more on the environment, and their productive resources that they would have saved for. So this is working for them in terms of helping them build resilience.
Let me stay on women for a moment and follow up with the question that often people argue that women don't have the luxury of worrying about issues like climate change, or that's sort of a second-tier issue compared to just trying to get along and get by for their families. When you're out there, what do you see women thinking about in terms of climate change, and do they understand the economic benefits for certain kinds of investments rather than others as you're working on climate-smart agriculture?
Let me just give you a simple example that comes from when I was a minister about a month or so ago. When a few, like 3 seasons back, Rwanda, where I was the minister, actually started experiencing real climate change in the sense that rains became more sporadic, less predictable, less regular. And one of the questions that I would get from farmers would be, Agnes, it hasn't rained, what are you going to do? Because they know that I worked for a person who was very, very much focused on output, on what we get to farmers, on results. So they would worry that when we have that accountability day, I'm going to be asked questions about rainfall that I can't answer. Now, a few days, today, farmers are asking themselves, women are asking themselves, what are we going to do? Because 3 consecutive seasons, rains haven't been as predictable as they're supposed to be. They are being challenged to think about what they're going to do next. They are being challenged to come up with alternatives that they hadn't thought about before. Women are usually the ones that are facing this because they have to care about what their families are going to eat next. They have to care about the school fees of their children. They have to care about so much more. They're involved in post-harvest management so much more. So the losses that we're incurring today because of increasing pest pressure after harvest are having much more impact on women because it's forcing them to make choices that they wouldn't have had to do in the past. So yes, women are being very much affected by what's happening today.
That's fascinating. Peter, I want to talk about forest conservation. Obviously, so many of your products, you've just talked about textiles and fiber, but so many of your products are wood-based products. Forest conservation is very much on some people's minds. Can you tell us what you're doing and how that's affecting your sourcing and other activities?
Well, again, I think it falls back to our vision. We want to create a better everyday life for the many people. And that, of course, also means that we care about the forests. We want forests to be well managed. IKEA was one of the first members of FSC, Forest of Stewardship Council. And what we've done is that we've set out that 100% of our woods in our home furnishing products will come from more sustainable sources. And that's one of the things that we're doing. And besides that, we've engaged ourselves together with partners like WWF to secure that a larger part of forests becomes certified and becomes well managed. And so far we contribute to an area of about 35 million hectares, which is more or less the size of Italy, and we've committed to another 15 million hectares to be certified. And that's one way of what we're doing in order to realize the strategy that we have to become people and planet positive. And that's, of course, well beyond the total needs that we have within IKEA. So it's a way for us to, in action, showing that we care for the forests.
You have a lot of small actors along your supply chain. You've told us about a variety of your initiatives. Are they joining you? Are they neutral or agnostic about your actions here? Or does that make you really a more favored partner for them?
No, what we see is that more and more, many, many years ago, doing business was very much about finding the best deal. Now it's something else. We do business with suppliers that we share values with, that sees on the challenges that we have in society and as businessmen on the same way as we do. And of course, we encourage each other, and we learn from each other, and we challenge each other to make our business more sustainable in the materials that we use, but also trying to securing that we take care of people and the workers, for instance, that's out in our factories. We have a code of conduct that's called the I-Way, the IKEA way of purchasing home furnishing goods. And since the introduction of it, the year 2000, we have now close to 200,000 audited improvements in our supply chain. So there are many ways for us to have a clear point of view on the way we would like to make business, and our suppliers, they appreciate that, and they would like to be an active partner in it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've had 4 panelists who have taken very different perspectives, but sitting up here and having the opportunity to ask them questions and talk to them, I'm really heartened by the prospects of aligning economic interests with what we have to do with regard to climate change. Please join me in thanking our panelists.